Hello, welcome to the next one of these. We take a look now at this one, against sweatshops. In third world sweatshops, people are worked to unhealthy and undignified levels. Their welfare is very low. They are suffering greatly. Violence is often used to prevent workers from unionising. Forced abortions are common. Forced injections of amphetamines are also common in some sweatshops. Wages are on or below the poverty line. People are often thrown out of work in their mid-20s because they are physically exhausted with ailments such as arthritis. There are often no toilet breaks for hours on end. Sometimes shifts go on for up to 20 hours without overtime being paid. Conversely, there are days when there is no work and hence no pay, and hence people can't afford to eat. This kind of treatment is exploitation. If you disagree, I seriously ask you whose fucking side you're on. I'm not joking. Okay, so this stuff is real and it's unjust. Response to right-wing apologism for sweatshops. If these people weren't provided with sweatshop jobs, they wouldn't have any jobs and then they'd be starving. What is the response to this objection? Well, to be horribly exploited is possibly better than to be starving. So yes, perhaps they are in a better position than if they were dying of hunger. For these workers, that's a case of being in a better position than if things were even more desperate. For the employers, that doesn't let them off the hook at all, ethically. Exploitation, taking advantage of someone's desperation to mistreat them for your own profit, is never justified. So remember, the kind of conditions we're talking about and so on, okay? Exploitation, taking advantage of someone's desperation to mistreat them for your own profit, is never justified. The point is not that we shouldn't set up factories, but rather that we should not mistreat workers. Secondly, we are not so poor that we can't afford to pay people above poverty line wages to make our trainers and mobile phones and everything else. Questions. Is it okay to make people work for 20-hour shifts with virtually no break? Is it okay to inject people with amphetamines against their will? Are forced abortions okay? Is it okay to use violence to prevent people from unionising? Can we really not afford to pay people above poverty line wages? Is it okay to refuse overtime pay? Is it okay that safety conditions are so lax that people die in factory fires? More points. Labour costs are the lowest, or among the lowest, in most of the things we buy from the developing world. To pay people better and treat them better would actually not make goods uncompetitive. We can afford to do this, and it is a moral imperative. You wouldn't treat someone in your own community like cattle. Why should developing country people be treated like cattle? Leave aside the notion for now that even cattle shouldn't be treated like cattle either. Let's treat animals well too, for fuck's sake. A part of the problem at the systemic level is that Western corporations contract to subcontractors and often sub-subcontractors. Finished products must be to specification at the lowest costs possible. Thus, there is great deal of competition to produce goods as cheap as possible, and this is what leads to high levels of exploitation. Let's zoom out to the big picture. Why is there such a surplus of unskilled labour in these countries? in the first place. If these workers were less numerous and or higher skilled, they wouldn't be so exploitable. Well, we have to think about why these countries are poor in the first place. And the answer is the colonial and neo-colonial legacy. See the section on neo-colonialism in this blog. It is our history of exploiting these countries' resources which has made them poor. And it is because they are poor that we are able to exploit them for labour. If they had governments which put development first, they'd do better. But that would mean being more assertive in terms of getting decent terms of trade with the West and being able to regulate Western corporations so they do not just take. And every time they have done that, we've overthrown those governments and replaced them with corrupt or fascist dictatorships, or we've allowed nominally democratic governments but hamstrung them by severely curtailing the range of policies which they have been allowed to use. So it's not the sweatshop workers' fault that they are desperate and hence exploitable. We need to be doing a lot more than offering these people jobs that treat them like animals and barely keep them alive. We need to be righting the historic and not so historic wrongs which have got them into a position of exploitability in the first place.